Web page development. So we're going to start getting into web development here and working with a lot of different technologies. Things like HTML, JavaScript, cascading style sheets, ASP.NET. You're going to hear terms such as the client side, the server side, web servers, browsers, and there's a lot of different technologies. And that's because when you go to a browser and you type in a URL or a web page, there's a lot that goes on in order to get that web page back into the browser so we can use it. Things like it has to go through the internet, find the web server that the web page sits on. Then the web server is going to create that page, maybe using server-side technology, send it back over to the internet into the browser, where the browser will then render that page so the user can work with it. So there's a lot of technologies that need to kind of work together in order to give us a web page. And with this nugget, we're going to specifically focus on the client side technologies such as HTML, JavaScript, and cascading style sheets. So these are all what we call client-side technologies because it's what the browser uses to render the page to us. So in a future nugget, we'll look at server-side technologies and how we can leverage ASP.NET to create web applications. And you're going to hear web page development versus web application development. Just think of web page development as client-side technologies and web application as server-side technologies. All right, let's jump into the outline for this nugget. We're going to start with an overview of web development here. I just want to get you familiar with the process again of when we request a web page through the browser, how it gets over to the web server and back to us, all the technologies that are involved in that process, how they work together, and again, just kind of give you a layer of separation here between where all of these technologies sit. So once we get familiar with that, we're going to jump into client-side technology, and I want to get you up to speed here on what HTML is, what cascading style sheets are all about, what JavaScript is, how they all fit and work together to render a web page to the browser, how the browser renders a web page to the user. And then we'll get in here and we'll get familiar with how to work with each one of these technologies individually, and again, how we can work with and build a web page using all three of them and how they can work together to make some pretty cool stuff. We'll make a pretty cool looking web page with all the basics and then some here. We'll use HTML to create the layout. We'll use cascading style sheets to format it, and we'll use JavaScript to make something happen. All right, let's take an overview here of web development. So here's our sides. Here's our client side. Here's our server side. In the middle, we have the cloud, the www, the World Wide Web, or the internet, however you want to say it. It's basically the binary highway, so to speak. So what we have then is what we're going to be concerned with as developers is the client side and the server side. You may have to do a little bit of both. Maybe you're purely a server side developer, maybe you're purely a client side developer, but it's good to know all of this stuff because as a developer, you're going to be working with other developers. You need to speak the lingo and understand where all this stuff fits. So starting with the client side, because that's what we're going to be covering here in this nugget mainly, we have the browser. And the browser is what we use obviously here to type in a URL and to get a web page so we can work with it. So on the client PC, here's where the browser sits. That's the client side, and that's where all these technologies are going to be sit inside of the browser here that we're going to work with. HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. We've got CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And we have JS, which stands for JavaScript. And these are the technologies we're going to use to make that the browser is going to understand here to render this web page to the user. So what happens is when we type in a URL into the browser, all that information is going to get sent through HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, the main protocol that the internet uses to transfer data back and forth between clients and servers. It's going to go through the internet to the server side where it's going to hit a web server. And really, a web server is just a server with software is really where the web server is. And in this case, we're going to use, if in the Microsoft world, usually you'll use IIS, Internet Information Services. This is Microsoft's software that turns a server into a web server that can listen for requests, and then serve up web pages. So this is where IIS can run server-side technologies such as ASP.NET. And we're going to cover this here in a future nugget again. But what will happen is IIS is just responsible for listening to those requests, grabbing the right web page, and then processing it using server-side technologies, sending it back over the wire to the client's PC to the browser. It will do the rest, render the HTML, execute any JavaScript it needs to, and then also format it here using cascading style sheets. So again, as developers, we're really going to be responsible for server-side development and planting, when we're done, our web applications and our web pages inside of a web server, inside of IIS, where we're going to learn how to create things like virtual directories, things of that nature, to put our web applications so they can be served up when people request them through a browser. So that's web development in a nutshell. And again, as web developers, our main responsibilities are going to be on the client side here, understanding how to work with and build web pages using client technologies, and on the server side, using these programmable server-side technologies. And there's a lot of little stuff we'll pick up on the way, such as state management, because web pages and applications are known to be stateless, meaning they don't remember their data between these trips. So we don't have the luxury we do with Windows applications, where all that data can be stored in memory and persisted here locally on a hard drive, where we don't have that luxury here with web applications. So we'll take a good look here when we get into to state management here in a future nugget. We'll take a look at how to work with cookies on the client side and work with state and session management here on the server side. All right, let's look at these client-side technologies that we're going to be working with here in this nugget, a little bit more detail. Starting off with HTML. And HTML stands for the Hypertext Markup Language. It's been around really since the internet has gone public, and it's really what people use to create web pages, especially in the old days. They would create just a static web page using HTML. And HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's just a tagged language where we wrap things inside of tags, and depending on what kind of tag it's in, it determines its behavior in the web page. So it's very easy to get the hang of, and it's really, even today, the basis of most web pages. It really holds everything in place. And I like to do the building analogy when I describe these technologies. If you think of a building here, HTML would be the structure, the brick and the mortar and the piping and everything that kind of holds the building together, the framework and all that good stuff. And as a side note, a lot of server-side programming languages like ASP.NET just generate HTML dynamically and send it over to the browser. So I'll give you an example of that when we get into server-side programming. Now we also have CSS, Cascading Style Sheets, and this is another one that's easy to get the hang of, very easy to pick up, and also really useful. It's really neat, and it allows us to give our web pages a little bit of pizzazz, give it their own look and feel and colors and fonts, and this is also how people accomplish themes and skins within their web applications. So CSS is another great way to kind of separate our content from our styles. We don't have to embed all of our style information inside of our HTML tags. We can separate it. We can put it in its own file. And if we have multiple, again, themes or skins to our site, we can have multiple files, and we can just kind of apply those files to our web pages to get the desired results. So CSS is really neat. And taking our building analogy here, this is how we can take our building and give it some color, give it its own look and feel. And finally here we have JavaScript, and think of JavaScript as the action within a building. It's the electricity. It's the code behind a doorbell that when we click on the doorbell, it makes it ring. So the only thing here is that JavaScript runs on the client side. So it's a client-side scripting language that's run inside of the browser. And what that means is anytime we need to run some code, we can offload it onto the client, so it does not, as long as we can do it on the client, it won't have to go back to the database or back to the web server and refresh the entire page. So JavaScript is very popular because of that, because it allows us to make our web pages more interactive and more responsive, because again, we're running code in the client, we're not making a round trip to the server, so we're not making the user wait for something. And there's actually, it's kind of morphed into, these days, something even more popular called AJAX, which stands for Asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And really, this is just a bundle of technologies that it's JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, because you can use HTML and CSS inside of here to do formatting. But what AJAX really is, and what it does, is it allows us to take a part of a web page and, without refreshing the entire web page, go back to the server, to the web server, to make another request and to bring data back dynamically underneath the hood again, and only refresh that part of the page rather than making the user wait for the whole page. So a little outside of the scope of this course, but I just wanted to point that out, because you'll certainly be seeing and working with AJAX in the future if you become a web developer. So we're going to focus on these three major client-side technologies. I want to get you familiar with each one of these. So let's take a look here at HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Let's minimize the whiteboard and head on over to Nugget Lab. And once we're over here, let's fire up, by going to the Start button, Microsoft Visual Web Developer 2010 Express. This is the Express version of Visual Studio that allows us to create web pages, web applications, websites, all that good stuff. So to get started here, we want to create a new website. And we can either click on the link here on the Start page, or we can go to the File menu and choose New Website. And once in here, we have some templates to choose from. If you choose ASP.NET Website, that's going to give us a website with some files that are pretty much hooked up and ready to go for server-side programming. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an empty website and add our own files in here, because again, we want to stick kind of with the client-side technologies just to get familiar with these front-end technologies. All right, so the next thing we need to do is just define where it's going to go. You can choose file system. You can choose HTTP if you want to plan it on a web server, or FTP if you want to plan it on a FTP server somewhere. Let's just keep this simple. We'll stick it on the file system here. It's going to go inside of My Documents, Visual Studio 2010, Websites instead of Projects. We've been working with the Projects folder up to this point. And I'm just going to give this name 13 underscore webpage development. Like so. We'll click on OK. And this is just going to give us an empty project here with a web.doc and fig file in it. If we want to add something in here, we can right-click, choose Add New Item, and here are all the different web items that we can add into our web project. So here's a web form, and this is what we're going to be working with when we get into server-side projects, because this is an ASPX form, and it comes pre-wired basically to run on the server, and it's hooked up to a code behind, so we can write events for it and all that good stuff. So we'll get into this when we get into the server-side part of web design. For now, we want to keep it simple though, and we're going to create an HTML page. And you can see there's all kinds of other web stuff. Here's a JavaScript file. We'll talk about how to work with JavaScript. And down here is our style sheet for a cascading style sheet there. So again, let's keep this simple. We'll have this an HTML page. Let's just call this default.htm and click on Add. So at this point, it gives us an HTML page, pretty much just with the structure that it needs to run, because we could do nothing right now. Right-click on our page and choose View in Browser, and it would work. See that? Look at that. It actually worked. Even though there's nothing there, it worked. It's done processing, and no errors were generated or anything like that. And you can see whenever you do that, browse it from a project, it's going to open up kind of a temporary on-the-fly web server for us to host these pages in. All right, so it worked. It gave us exactly what we needed to work. We just have to add the content to make it work. And just go over some of the stuff in here. The doc type is always going to be the initial declaration inside of an HTML page. These are just processing instructions to tell the browser what version of HTML that this page is using. Same with this namespace down here, just what version of HTML the specific page is using and supports. That way we can, it's going to validate against all the tags that we use to make sure they're in line with what we're using. And also, again, the browser will know then what HTML version to use when parsing our page. Alright, so let's spice this page up a little bit. And the first thing you can see is everything inside of an HTML page is wrapped in these two tags right here, HTML. And then underneath here, we have some head tags here, and you'll see head will become a little bit more important when we talk about style sheets and JavaScript. But for now, you can see this is where the title goes. So if we just type in welcome here, we'll be able to see that right up here as a caption on the window of the browser. We also have the body. This is where all of our main content is going to go. And then again, we close these tags here with a forward slash. So inside of the tags is where the content that fits inside of the tags goes. So for body, for instance, say we wanted to put something on the HTML page, we could use an h1 tag. And we get IntelliSense support here too, which shows us all the possible tags we can use inside of the body. So if we do an h1, and let's just say, how about got nuggets? And then it'll close it out for us. If we save this and view it in the browser, we should get got nuggets, and there's our welcome tag up there. See that? Pretty simple, right? And that's just basic HTML there. H1, it means it's basically the largest heading, and there's H1 through H6, which just go from largest to smallest. Now let's get a little more interesting here, and I'm going to add an image into our folder here, into our project. So I'm going to right-click on our website, choose New Folder, and let's just call this IMG for images, right? These are all, we'll put all the images for our website, and I'm going to add an image into here. So I'm going to right-click on the Image folder, choose Add Existing Item, and in the C drive of our Nugget Lab machine here, I've got an image, and I'm just going to choose All Files as the filter. Here it is, nugget_logo.png. So if we add this into our image folder, there we go. Now we've got an image to work with. And you can actually double-click this, and it'll open it up here, and you can see it says CBT Nuggets logo. So we've got that to work with. Now let's add this to the page here. So let's just go down here and type in, how about IMG, standing for image. This is the image tag. And then we can just do an src equals, And what's cool about this is we can actually browse right to it. We can hit this build button here. It'll say pick URL, and we can just navigate right into our Nugget logo, and then it'll add it in there. Image/Nugget logo.png. And now we can just close the tag, and that's that. If we view this in the browser, right click on our page, view in browser. Yes, we want to save it. We should got nuggets with the Nugget logo underneath. Now another thing we can do here with the image tag is that you'll notice it's got a little green squiggly line. If you hold your mouse over it, it'll tell us element image is missing required attribute alt. And the alt just gives us some alternate text in case the link to the image is ever broken. It'll show this text. So let's just call this CBT Nuggets home page, like so. And now everyone should be happy. So if we right click and view this in the browser, we'll say yes to saving it. We're not going to see any difference because the image is still there and it's fine, so we're not going to see the alternate text here, but everything should be fine. This green squiggly line should go away here shortly because it's valid HTML. Now if I just break this, I'm just going to go ahead and say logo1.png. Now if we view this in the browser, we should actually see the alternate text, and there it is. Instead of the image, we get the text, so people kind of know what this image should be, all right, if it was there. And as you can see there, now we've got the green squiggly line under the file because it doesn't exist in the project. So let's fix that, turn that back, and now everything should be good. Now another thing we can do, let's say we wanted this image to be a link, something we could click on and take us somewhere. Well, we could wrap the image inside of an anchor tag. We call this an anchor tag, and the href is the website we're going to navigate to when someone clicks on it. So let's just go ahead and type in, how about http://www.cbtnuggets.com. There we go, and then we can take this a tag and put it underneath the image. That way it's wrapped around the image. So now the image itself becomes a hyperlink. So if we right click and view this in the browser now and save it, and look at that, if we hold our mouse over it, it becomes a hand, and we get down here, we've got exactly where we would navigate to if we click on it. If we click on it, it's going to take us to the Nugget website. Pretty cool, right? And very easy to do. Now we can also add a height and width on here. If we want to force a height and width rather than the large logo that it is, we can just start typing in here, height equals, and let's just call this, how about 50, and we're going to get the width then equal to, let's say, 130. Alright, so that'll control the width and the height a little bit better. And if we view this in the browser, there we go, much better, a little bit smaller here, and now we can get some content in the middle. I'm just going to paste in a table here, so I don't have to type all this, you don't have to watch me type it all. But what this is going to do is we're just going to put some data in between there. So a table kind of gives us that, if you're familiar with Excel, rows and columns, table data, table headers, all that good stuff. That's exactly what we're doing. We're creating a table. And this is the kind of stuff you do from server-side programming to dynamically generate this kind of stuff. All right, and just to kind of give you an idea of what this is going to look like before I go through it, I'm just going to right-click, view it in the browser, say yes to saving it, and it's going to look like this, where we have a table of data. We've got our headers up here, we've got rows going down, and then we've got table data inside. So all those things that I just mentioned, we have tags for to identify each one of those pieces of information. So how do we do it? Well, we start with the table tag. So everything is going to be wrapped inside of a table. That tells us the start and the end of our table. Everything inside of here is part of a table. And then we just create a bunch of table rows. Every one of those was a row. All right, so our table row here, first one was actually going to contain the table headers, category and technology. And that's just going to center them, bold them, make them look, like they're actual headers inside of the table. And then the rest of the rows are just containing table data. So we've got TD followed by just text, TD text, and then inside of each one of those rows has their own table data. And at the end here we've got a BR and an HR. These are just ways to create space, essentially. So if we view that in the browser again and save it, you can see one of them, a BR, is a line break, where an HR is a horizontal line. So this will kind of give us the footer look and feel. So we've got a header here, kind of a title. We've got the data. We've got a footer with our link down here that takes us to the Nugget website. Pretty cool, right? And very simple, all done using basic HTML. Now, what if we wanted to take this a step further and incorporate cascading style sheets to make it look a lot nicer? Because right now, it's really just a bunch of plain old text, right? It doesn't really look all that great. And we like to snazz it up a little bit, make it look a little nicer. So what we can do is back up in the header, we can add an inline style sheet. And I say inline is because we're going to plant the style sheet right inside of the HTML. And I'll show you here at the end of the nugget how we can take both our CSS files and our JavaScript files, or code I should say, CSS code and JavaScript code, and turn them into files externally. So we could store them in maybe a different folder here, one for styles, one for JavaScripts, and it'll just give us a much cleaner page here. And that way we can, kind of get that code separation too. Code separation is really nice. It helps you manage things, much easier to put things in their own spot, so everything's kind of centralized. So let's get a style sheet going. And what we can do here is use the style tag inside of the header. So we're just going to define our styles here. So inside of the first style tag, we need to just do this right here. Type equals text CSS, right? Just a more processing instructions here. Once we get that set up, now we can start defining our styles. And really what this allows us to do is say we want every H1 within our web page to look a certain way. Well, rather than do the old-fashioned way of going into the H1 tag and doing things like this, you can set your style inside of here, kind of on the fly here, and you can give it fonts and colors, background colors, all that good stuff. It's much easier to define this in a style, so it applies to all the H1 tags. So we define it in one spot rather than define it each one individually. And we still have the power, if we want multiple H1s to look a little bit differently, we can still define them differently up top and then give them tags down here to kind of tell us which H1s go to which style. And I'll show you how to do that here when we get down into the table rows, because we're going to do alternating colors on our table. But let's just start here keeping it simple, and let's just take our H1 tag down here and style it, which if we had more H1s, they would all get styled this way currently. So all we need to do is first identify it by just typing in H1, and then an open squiggly and a close squiggly. Now anything we do in here is going to be all the things we can do with H1, all the styles we can do. So we can do colors on the background, we can do a background image, position. I mean, there's virtually anything you can think of here. Borders, the border colors, fonts, margins, you name it, it's in here and we can do it. And let's just keep this simple. Let's give it a font here. So let's do font family equals, how about Arial? We'll do Arial on this one. There we go. And you should get IntelliSense on here, like I'm getting now. It's just sometimes when you backspace out of it, you kind of lose it here, which I was doing. I was backspacing all over the place. So, but very easy to get it back here. If you actually just erase it, hit tab, start typing. Oh no, I'm not going to get it back here. What am I going to do? I gotta retype in the front here. Yeah, there we go. Now we'll get it back. So font family is going to equal Arial, like so. So if we do that, all we need to do is close it now with a semicolon, just like C#. So that's it, and we can do as many as we want inside of here. So let's also, how about do a color here? And the color we're going to do, I got a nice color here right off the Nugget website that I stripped out of their source page. So let's just do this to make it look like part of the Nugget website. There we go. So that's hexadecimal for the color, kind of the yellowish color that we get on CBT Nuggets website. So if we do that, hit yes, check it out. There is our heading. Got nuggets? All right. All right, let's take this a step further once again, and I'm just going to paste in the rest of this style sheet, and we'll go over all of the code in here. All right, and starting at the top, what I did here is just add some code for our table, some style for our table here. And this is just going to apply to the table because that's what we define it as, the table. We're going to collapse the border on the entire table, give it the font family of Arial, give it a font size of 12 pixels. And then this is interesting here. If you comma separate them, you can apply a style to 3 or as many as you'd like different objects here. So we're doing table, table data, and table header should all have a border of 1 pixel that is solid black border. And then if we only want to apply it to the table header, you do this. Table header, we're going to give a background color with a foreground color of white. Table data, we're going to put some padding inside of it. And then here where we're taking the TR, the table row, dot alt, and table data, we're giving this color and this background color. And I'm going to explain this. We'll come back to this one in a little bit here. And then finally here, the anchor tag with the image in it, we're just going to set that border equal to none so it doesn't have that silly purple border around it. All right, so that's going to give us pretty much all we need to do to really make the web page look good and stand out here using cascading style sheets. And let me show you what it looks like, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how we apply this one right here and what that means, tr.alt. So if we right click, view this in the browser, and say yes to the changes, we should get a much nicer looking page. We can see we have our border gone, we have our table set up nicely with our padding in place, background colors up here on the headers with our foreground color being white, and a good looking style here to a simple web page. So what we wanted to do though is get alternating background colors inside of that table to look like a really super fancy table, right? And how we do that here is we define a class on it. That's why we did a tr.alt. So what that means now is on our alternate table rows, we want to assign a class to them so they get applied. So if we do a class equals alt, see that? And actually picked it up right out of the style sheet there. We can do this. I'm just going to copy this and go to our alternate one down here, database nuggets, and put this class in here as well. So what that'll do for us, if I right click on the page, view it again, is give us alternating colors inside of the table rows. So that's where that comes in. We're defining a class up above here inside of our style sheet saying table rows.alt. So any table row with an alt class, apply to the table data a background color of this and a foreground color of that. And that's what we get. All right, let's take this one final step further and look at how we can incorporate JavaScript into our pages. So again, JavaScript is a scripting language inside of the browser. The browser can run code, believe it or not, and JavaScript is really the main programming language of choice for browsers. It's been around forever. It's just tried and true and tested and used absolutely everywhere around the internet. All right, so to add your own scripts into here, we can just open a tag, start typing script, and it'll give us the tags that we need here, just like so. And in here we also need to declare the type, so we'll do a type equals text/JavaScript. And now, just like we define our styles, we can define our JavaScript functions, and then we're going to have to hook them up into our page. So I'm just going to highlight all this and paste in some codes. You don't have to watch me type once again. And here's a very simple script that allows us to have a clock on our web page. So we're going to put a clock in the footer of our web page to give our web page a little bit of that action I was speaking about earlier. And since you're on your way with C# and learning C#, JavaScript should be fairly easy to pick up because it's a lot like C# syntactically. It's not it's not strongly typed. No scripting language is really strongly typed. And what that basically means is here we just have data type. We don't have the rich set of data types that we have and the rich set of compile time checking that we have inside of C# and Visual Studio here. We've got just very basic stuff, and really you're just going to be using variables on the fly here, just standard old variables that can store any data type. So for instance here we're creating a function called start clock. So this is the function we're going to call from say an h5 tag or something like that, an h tag down here we're going to create in our HTML page that'll reference this start clock. So what we do first is create a variable called today and set it equal to a new date. So this will get us the full date stored inside of this variable. And then we're just going to slice up the date into hours, minutes, and seconds and store them all in their own variables. And then we've got another function down here that we're going to call called check time. And all this is going to do is just pad the number. So if it's a 1, this is today.getHours, a JavaScript function called getHours, just returns the number, not 0 padded. So that's all we're doing is we're padding it. So if it's between 1 and 9, it's going to put a 0 in front of it, so it'll look like 01 through 09. Really, I just wanted to show you this to show that you can create functions inside of JavaScript just like we can in any other programming language and call them. So we do a check time on the minutes and seconds to make sure that we have them 0 padded. And here's where we actually insert the time into an object down here inside of our page. So what we do is a document.getElementById, and we're passing in txt. And now we don't have anything down here yet, so we're going to have to add one. And if we wanted to add one, say underneath our tag down here, we could just simply do something like this. We can do an h5 id equals txt. That's it. That's all there is to it. And we can even close this like so. So because this ID is txt, we're referencing it from our JavaScript saying getElementById, get the element inside of the current document, and set the inner HTML equal to h:\m colon S, all concatenated together. So that'll give us the hours, minutes, and seconds, 0 padded through our functions inside of the H5 tag. And then we just call this JavaScript function called setTimeout, where we call setClock at 500 milliseconds. So this is basically going to wait a half a second until the page loads before it starts up. That's all it's doing. So the last thing we need to do is just call our function from our page. So I'm going to copy the name of our function and scroll down to the body. And let's say when the body gets loaded by using the onLoad event, it's going to call our startClock function, just like so. And you could call this from anywhere. Really, you could put a button on here somewhere and tie the onClick event. So when they click on a button, it starts the clock. We're just going to put it in the body onLoad event here. And if we save this, right-click on our page and choose View in Browser, we should get the time, whatever time it is here on the Nugget Lab server. And there it is. It's currently 2:28 on the Nugget Lab server, and that's what we get on our page. And it's refreshing itself every half a second because that function keeps calling itself. If you remember, we called the setTimeout on it. It's going to keep calling itself and update itself every half a second. So there it is. We've got some JavaScript on our page running inside of the browser right now to give us a clock on the bottom of our page. So there's a small taste of HTML, cascading style sheets, and JavaScript for you. All these client-side technologies you'll be using in your web pages to make things happen. Now, one other thing I do want to show you is how you can take these, because you can see it can get a little crazy in here, especially if you have a lot of scripts and a lot of style sheets. You don't want to kind of mess up our pages and make it very hard to manage because you'll be scrolling for days looking for things. So it's a lot easier to put these in their own files, and it's a little easier to manage as well. And what we can do here, let's take our JavaScript, for instance. I'm going to just right-click, choose, let's just add a new folder in here. We'll just call this our scripts folder. And in here, I'm going to right-click, add new item, and let's just do a JScript file. And we'll just call this, for now, how about clock.js. We'll add it in here, and you can see it's just an empty page. That's all there is to it. So what we'll do here is I'm just going to highlight our script functionality. And inside of clock.js, let's just paste it all in there. And you know what? We don't even need our script tags in here. We just simply need our functions. Alright, there we go. Just like that. Now we can go to our default.html, and we are still going to need our script tag. Only this time, instead of having a script in here, we can just simply do an src equals. We can pick our URL. We can browse right to our clock.js. Just like so. Pretty cool, right? That's all there is to it. Now we have a reference to our script, and everything should work the same. If we save this, right-click on our default.html, view it in the browser, there's our clock, still running. Only now we've got that code separation that everybody likes, because it's much easier to manage now, because we're not clogging up our page with unnecessary things, and it's all of our code for our clock is stored in one file. And we can do the same thing here with our style sheet. Oh, and by the way, our script tag is yelling at us here because we actually still need to define a type here as text, JavaScript, and there we go. Now it's happy. So the next thing I want to do is just show you the same thing here, only as it pertains to styles, because it's just a little different in how you link it in to your main page here. So first things first, let's just right-click on our website, add a new folder. We'll call this one Styles, and then right-click on our Styles folder, add a new item, and let's just add a style sheet here. We'll call this the same thing, styles.css. You can see it gives us just a little helper here on the body, but we're not going to need that at all, so let's get that out of there. Go back to our page. I'm just going to highlight all of our style here, cut it, and we'll paste it all inside of here. Again, same thing. We do not need the style tags in here. We just need all of our definitions, just like so. So that's all there is to it, and you can just come in here anytime and make changes to them or add new ones, and it'll be linked back to our main page. And how we do that is something like this. We need to do a link. And then we do our rel, relatives here is going to equal a style sheet. See, just like so. And now we need to define the type. It's going to equal, once again, text.css. And then finally here, where is it? We use an href for that. We can just pick our URL inside of our styles, styles.css, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Alright, so in this CBT Nugget, we took a look at web page development. We started off with just talking about what web development is all about. Talked about the client side, the server side, some of the technologies that exist on both sides, and just kind of the process as a whole, and what the web is all about. Once we kind of get familiar with what goes where here in the web world, we talked about the client side and got you familiar here with some client side technologies. We focused on HTML, the hypertext markup language, which is really the framework for web pages. We then took a look at CSS, cascading style sheets, and saw that that's how we can format our web pages. And then we took a look at JavaScript, which is the client side scripting language that runs inside of the browser that allows us to give our web pages some action. And we can do a lot of things with the scripting languages in real time there in the browser. I hope this has been informative for you, and I thank you for viewing.